What's going on? My name is Zach Kenny, and this is our van Hoagie, and it's a 2021 Ford Transit 350 all-wheel drive. And in this video, we're going to tell you how we got it, why we picked the van, but more importantly, how we built it out, and everything that goes into that. So we're here currently in the Texas beaches on Padre Island, and what better place to show off the van? So for nearly a decade, my wife and I have been looking and thinking about and possibly one day owning a camper van of ourselves, especially after moving out west to Utah, where every single campsite, every single trailhead, they're full of them. So what actually made us go and trade in our truck with the camper on top to actually get the van? Well, that all goes to the 2023 winter of all time. Utah received the most snow on record, and yeah, it nearly broke us. So we decided to get a van, build it out, and chase sun all winter long. In that spring, we really started researching as best we could. We had some limitations, restrictions, and goals here. The limitations primarily, which drove us to either a Transit or a Sprinter, was that we needed four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. Where we live is on the top of a mountain, and in the winter, it's a snow-covered road, so it's sort of a non-negotiable. And the other things that sort of defined the criteria of what we needed and looked for in a van was that we were planning to do everything in it. So that means we're going to obviously sleep, we're going to eat, but more importantly, we're going to be working. We're both remote employees, and so we're able to sort of work from places around here as long as we have service. Not only do we need space to eat, but like actually comfortably work for 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day. And then additionally, places to store just our food, clothes, gear, especially gear. So when you factor all those requirements in, you end up with, hey, we need a pretty big van, to be honest, and best bang for your buck is going to be the Transit. We've driven Sprinters, and they are awesome. Just when it came down to it, the Sprinter cost a fair amount more money initially, as well as through all the services. So eventually we found Hoagie, and it is a 2021 Ford Transit 350. It's the big boy extended, and it's all-wheel drive. So it was the dream van. Sadly, it does not have the EcoBoost, but we're getting by just fine, and it's doing well, especially in the mountains. We were able to find this van actually at a Mercedes-Benz dealership in Salt Lake. That day we went down there and picked it up because these things, they flew right off the shelf. And though we haven't done too much to the outside, it's still worth talking about. Starting off with the KO2 tires. I mean, if you're going to be in the mountains and in the snow, you need an all-terrain tire. And we can get away with most of our snow-covered roads if we're taking it easy, and we can chain up when we need to. But the KO2 has been tried and tested, especially by us. We had it on the Tacoma for a really long time, so I absolutely love this tire. And then right after Christmas, we actually got the Fiamma, the F45S, the 350, so the decently sized one, awning, and we put it on right before we hit the road to head down south. And though we haven't had much use for it, getting this thing out is going to be a lifesaver in the desert come summer, especially when we had downpours at the last place we were staying. It was nice to have that little area, just being able to transition from in and out of the van in the rain. So I am stoked to see this thing in the desert when we can actually expand our little footprint. Moving to the back of the van, we actually installed 2 slide bunk windows, and that was quite the experience. A little nerve-wracking cutting into your vehicle that you just bought. But that being said, they actually installed pretty well and pretty simply. And they actually bring in a really good cross breeze when you have the fan exhausting. And then to my right, I don't want to say it's my pride and joy, but I'm stoked on it. To be honest, a lot of the exterior stuff comes from a company called Flatline Van Co. And awesome. Great installation, great quality, and super, super helpful customer support. So this is the back rack, which bolts onto your passenger side in like 3 locations on the hinges and then 1 on the door. And then we got the arms that come out, and then we got the one-up bike trays to mount onto that. And then the guys actually at Flatline made sure that we were good to go, that this thing doesn't bounce around too much. And then up top we have Exodus Manufacturing makes a 20-pound propane tank holder, I think for a lot of those off-roading rigs, but it works out great. We were able to get it up and away, and then we could lower the bikes. And we had the bikes up in the beginning, and it was so difficult to get the bikes off. I don't know how people do it. And then I also got the Rotopax diesel can holder, and I get it, you're like, why do you have diesel? Inside we have one of them Chinese diesel heaters that heat the van fantastically, but I'll get to that later. So this is just an extra 2 gallons in case we need it, which we usually do. Also, I can't forget, we actually mounted the Road Shower 4 up there, which is going to be great after, you know, getting off the beach, or if we're in the desert. It's going to be pretty much our only means of showering. All right, then moving on to the driver's side, we have the other slider bunk window, and then on my right side here, we have the broad arrow curved window, which pops out. It's fantastic, especially right when we're cooking, but I'll show you that on the inside. And then right behind me, we have another thing from Flatline Van Co., which is the ladder, and that's been great to be able to access everything we need up on the roof, from the solar panels to also getting our surfboards up there. Moving up to the roof, we actually have 3 200-watt solar panels, and so at peak, you know, sunshine, they do around 300, 350s on a good day. And we found that this offsets our usage completely during the day. We're usually at 100% at sundown, and then it only dips below that at night when we're running the fan or it's hot and the fridge is really working. In the middle, we have the Max Air fan, which is tremendous, but I will get to that more when we go inside. But most importantly up here is the frame that this entire thing sits on. And that is another thing from Flatline Van Co. So this is their low profile roof rack for the 350, the extended transit, and it's fantastic. You can walk on it and it's supportive. I'm missing some pieces that I want to make a roof deck out of, but winter came a little bit too soon and I did not get a chance to build that. And that wraps up basically what we did on the outside. So let's head on inside and show you what we spent, 99% of our time on building. First things first was the sound deadening, which were little sticky panels that you put on the walls of the van. They say it's supposed to help with the vibration dampening and stuff like that, but nobody really knows because you end up building the walls over top of it anyway. So who knows? But then came a lot of the subfloor and then the framings. Put layers of hard foam on the floor and then ended up with like 3/4 inch birch plywood to make the floor. And then we insulated. So we did a bunch of different kinds of insulation. So a lot of it was going to be the rock wool, where we could fit it and stuff it into places. Then for the big sheets, we did a 3N Thinsulate. And then we framed out the entire van, ceiling and walls. And that was, to say it was difficult would be an understatement. So first things first, you got to end up putting the rivets in the walls. So you end up having to get a rivet puller. We had a manual one because we cheaped out. And yeah, it was a whole learning curve. Really interesting, to be honest, being able to install rivets to fix the studs on. So after we were done framing, since we had access to everything, we did all the wiring, and our battery bank and system is in the driver's side rear in the garage. So all the wires have to come from there all over the van. And so there's a web that my wife Courtney really tidied up, and it made it perfect to be able to work around, because then we were able to put the walls in and then make this place look like a real van for once. And then for the walls, we actually went with some of the paneling that comes from Home Depot. It's like 20 bucks a sheet, and so it's super lightweight, looks half decent, and more importantly, it's a lot easier to install than actually trying to run like, shiplap walls or tongue and groove. So if you like this look at all, can't recommend it enough then. Being up here in the front, we're up here in the kitchen area. So this was a sort of a cornerstone to build around. We sort of saw how much space we had to work with, and we wanted to maximize the kitchen, and I think we really nailed it. Now the countertop that we actually went with is just some Formica from Home Depot. So this entire setup, all the drawers, overhead cabinets, are actually all just kitchen cabinets and countertops from Home Depot. We were going to go down the path of building everything our own, but it was like November timeframe, or maybe even when it's December, and we're like, we're just not going to make this deadline if I try to spend a month or two building my first set of cabinets. This worked out really well. If you have the space, I cannot recommend them enough. I definitely think some of the drawer slides are going to fall apart later down the road, especially when you start hitting the desert season in the mountains. But right now, they're great, super functional, and they fit everything that we need. So up in the front, we have a sink. I think it's like a 15 by 15 square sink, and it is fantastic. And we got this flexible faucet that we got off of Amazon, and it works really, really well. This is a foot-powered pump. So a little foot pump tucked right underneath the bottom of the cabinet. Has all the water we need to do all of our dishes and anything else like that, cleaning things off. And so far it's been pretty good. We haven't needed to get the electric water pump. This has been great, and it really does conserve water, so we can't just run this thing indefinitely. And so far, so good. Then moving over to the left, we have a 3-burner Furrion stove. My wife found this, and it was like a whole, like, no refund, no returns, so it was a bit of a gamble, but there was a few people on the internet that said they love this, and we cannot recommend this enough. 3 burners so that your pots can be normal sized pots instead of like little campware, because if they're too close together, your pot will just be over the other burner. So I won't pretend like I know what I'm talking about. My wife does nearly all the cooking. With that being said, she says she loves this, and cooking with the propane has been fantastic. So whenever we are cooking, it's pretty simple to open up this window, and then we get a ton of cross breeze right through, and it makes it really nice. And especially if you're outside the van, you can poke your head in. But these windows are great, not just for that, but they have built-in blackout curtains, as well as, flipping them the other way, you have a built-in screen. So I cannot recommend these enough so far, and they're double pane, so they have not been really letting in any the cold air, which we tend to deal with a lot. And then further to the left, we just have an empty prep area. Most of the time this just gets filled with the miscellaneous items, but it's been nice to have when we need to cook, and be able to have either serving over here or just other open areas, which is nice when you're cooking. So like I said, cabinetry is from Home Depot, and then we have tons of storage in here. So in the middle is a lot of like pots and pans and things like that. We have miscellaneous and snacks in this drawer. And then in here is sort of the under the sink drawer. So we have a trash, and then our gray water tank. And then also some miscellaneous bathroom items. And then in the last cabinet, we have our fridge. So this is the Dometic 65, and right now most of the stuff is out of it, but it's plenty big enough, to be honest. We can always have a couple of cold beers in here, as well as enough dinners for about 2 to 3 days, and then sometimes we get to put the leftovers in there. And then as well on the top, it has a little ice maker up there, so we actually do get to have some ice cubes every now and then. Overall, I mean, it's a camper van fridge. It's not going to replace the fridge you have at home, but it's fantastic that we can travel around the country and have cold food and cold beer. And then the last cabinet that I haven't touched on was the entryway cabinet. And in here is our body. It's the Dometic, the portable camp toilet. So it's right now for emergencies only. And so far, so good. All right, moving to the back of the van, where honestly we spent most of our time pretty empty because we just moved most of our clothes and stuff into the place we're staying for the night so we could do some laundry. And I'd say this is a pretty traditional layout with the bed in the back and the dinette in the middle. So you end up with a sort of a galley. But what makes this thing a little bit more special is how we actually did the bed. So we didn't want a fixed bed because we wanted to maximize the space so that we can have sort of a night mode and then a day mode, so we can, work with a lot more space than just working around the bed that's always out, especially if we wanted a full-size bed, in this case a queen. So we found the solution. There was a few ways of doing it. We wanted a folding bed that would turn from like a couch to a bed, and there was plenty of ways to do this with actually making a hard frame that folds up. But the best option that we found was from a couple called Van Here's Adventure or something like that. They found a trifold mattress. And so the mattress is what hinges. So you didn't need to build any hard points or hard folding. So then to go from the couch mode to the bed mode, you end up just pulling it out. And voila! So this trifold mattress sort of folds down on itself. And then to go back up into couch mode, it's just the reverse of that. So granted, it's not the most convenient, but it works really, really well. So next up is the dinette area. Our dinette actually can seat 4 people, and we've actually done it, and it's pretty comfortable, to be honest. So I made these dinette seats not only for the obvious seating area, but they're tremendous storage underneath here. So underneath these pads that we got off of Amazon, they were custom. You can pick any size you want. We went with an outdoor material, and they've worked out really, really well. Hold up to both dog hair and dogs, and just us moving in and out of the van. So we have storage both in the backs and underneath the seats. Behind, we have a bunch of random stuff, and this can range from our toiletries to books. I almost have a library going right now since being on the road for almost 2 months. And then underneath here, it's pretty big. I mean, that's fully all the way to the wall, and this fits all of our computers, cameras, and stuff like that, as well as back further. We have some shoes on both sides, hers and his. And then the dog has his own little storage area. Just because we have seats, we actually need a table. That's probably the most important part of a dinette. And that is slide out from the back underneath the bed. So for this, we use a piece of butcher block that we actually had left over from the people that lived in our house before us, and then some heavy duty drawer slides that are like 200 pound, rated for 250 pounds. And this is big enough to have our laptop and a second monitor. Not very wide, so we're pretty close to the monitors, but it works out, and we're able to get the job done, especially when we're both during a busy time at work. And just like that, it folds away for when we're driving or we just need to hang out here. On both sides of the back, we have mine and my wife's, call it our closet. So these are from Van Essentials. They're a soft overhead storage. We realized we wanted these from a Sprinter we rented, and it was perfect. The entire overhead storage were the soft ones, so if you hit your head on it, it didn't hurt, and that was like, yep, light bulb moment, duh, let's get those. And this thing is super versatile. Around the entire outside is all these elastic pockets, so we put everything from gloves, hats, socks, belts, anything random, and then inside is massive storage area. I think this ends up being about 80 liters of storage if you want to equate it to like a duffel bag. So it is plenty and plenty of storage. My wife will disagree. She says she can always use more, but you know, here we are. So this has one big pocket in the front and then two smaller top and bottom. And now as for the electrical system. Now, I won't go into too much detail just because there's plenty of resources online and I don't want to be the one telling you how to build your electrical system, but I will tell you what we have and why we built it to that need, and you know, just the high level details. So the stats are going to be, we have the 600 watts of solar on the roof. We have 300 amp hours of Battle-Born batteries in the back. We have a 2000 watt inverter charger from Victron, a solar charger, obviously for the solar panels, as well as a DC to DC alternator chargers for when the van is driving. It also charges the batteries. And then throughout the van, you'll notice we have outlets for 12 volt as well as the household 110, as well as switches that control all the interior lights. And for the ones on the ceiling, they're actually on dimmers, which is super nice at night, so you're not blinded by all the light, especially in the morning when I want to get up and get in the front. I'm not just throwing on all the lights. So you might be asking yourself, why the hell did you put that much into this van? Well, like I mentioned before, we are planning to work out of this and live out of this. So this is not a weekend mobile. We built this for the extreme needs, and that's going to be how long can we possibly make it until we need a charge. And so we can go 2 to 3 days if we were running everything. So that's going to be your internet, the fan, the fridge on full blast, or the heater depending on the season, and all the lights, and as well as working with 2 monitors, charging phones, charging computers. So you name it, that's why we built it for it. And so far I think we've gone down to like 62% because it was cloudy for like 3 days in a row and rainy. But in the end, you can really never have enough batteries and juice. So that's sort of why we built it this way. One of the first things you actually have to build into the van is putting a hole in for your fan. And this thing's been fantastic, not only for when it's super hot out, but obviously when you're cooking. If you have a lot of smoke, you just want to get it up and out so it's not just hanging around, especially setting off our smoke detector. And there you go, super simple. You can use the remote to control if the fan is going to bring air in or exhaust it out, the speed, and then you can just open up the hatch without the fan on. Right now it's at 50% and it's bringing some air in. It feels pretty good. I like it a lot, but most importantly, when you have the rear windows open and you exhaust the air, that's really where you get the nice cross breeze when you're sleeping, and it's been pretty good. Random tip, try to be strategic where you put the fan. Obviously, if you put it over your bed, you're going to get that maximum cooling at night if it's really hot out. But if you're cooking, all that food and smoke is going to go over your bed and then out. So there's pros and cons, that's for sure. And then here we've got the covers for the window that are great when we're camping in like parking lots like a Walmart, but also keep the van nice and cool. But these sliders are great. You get both of them going, works out really well. Moving to the back of the van, we're at the garage, which is all the storage underneath the bed, and it's been fantastic. So we're able to store like 4 of these clear 55-liter containers, as well as one of these 102-liter containers. So we have plenty of storage here, and that's not including just the odds and ends that we can store back here. On the right-hand side, you'll notice we have our water container, which stores about 25 gallons. It has been plenty sufficient for what we need, especially since we're able to get water every 2 to 3 days so far on this road trip. And because we're running out of time in December, and you can't really work on water when it's below 32 degrees outside, so we had to scramble and figured it out on the road, but we ended up just doing a regular foot pump, which connects to just a bunch of vinyl tubing, and that hooks into this water tank and goes right to that faucet up in the front, and it's been pretty fantastic so far. Also back here you'll notice we have nets. This comes down and completely blocks it as well, or folds up completely out of the way so you can access in and out. Moving this container out of the way, start to reveal the brains of the operation, as well as a nice little diesel container. And these are used for 2 separate things, but pretty neat. So we have the diesel interior for our Chinese diesel heater, and that was fantastic. It was able to keep the van at like 70 degrees when it was 19 degrees outside. So that was primo. But this big black box in here that has all the Victron components mounted on it, that is where a bulk of my time spent building this van went. So my idea was to do a plug and play with the van electrical components. Because of how late it got into the van build, I didn't want to spend any more time outside than I have to building this thing. So my idea was to build this thing inside the house, have all the components ready, wired up, pre-wired, and then I could just connect them to the runs that are inside the van. Well, it technically worked, but I definitely think I would have done it differently and saved a little bit more space. But inside of this thing are the 3 100 amp hour batteries. Everything outside of it is connected to the batteries or the runs where they're coming from. And on here we also have the full 12-volt distribution panel, as well as the 4-breaker circuit for the household electric. We are able to charge off the shore power as well, so that is fantastic. Then moving to the front of the van, honestly, there's nothing special up here. It is as bone stock as it comes, but overall, to be honest, the ride of this thing is pretty fantastic. I say it rides like a minivan in the best way possible. If you've driven trucks for a long time, you know it feels like a truck. It's very stiff. Well, for these Transits and the Sprinters alike, I believe, you are over top the front wheels. So you are riding on that front suspension. So it feels really nice when you're driving. Only on the highways when you're doing like the 70, 80, do you really get blown around sometimes, especially when you're coming across the Midwest. But other than that, this thing drives really well, especially the all-wheel drive version on snow. And then when you're in the mountains, it's been really capable, which has been a surprise. And then behind me is actually a bulkhead that came with the van. So this was a cargo van, had some shelving in the back, and came with this bulkhead. And right now, I love it. I think we're going to keep it. People keep asking if we're going to replace it, maybe get some swivel seats. But right now, I like it mostly because it keeps a nice thermal barrier between the front, which has all the windows to let the cold air in, as well as the heat coming right through those. So it completely separates it. We can keep them like 30, 40 degrees difference, which is very, very nice. But also for safety. I trust what I built to withstand the rigors of being van life and driving around. However, I have no idea what's going to happen in a head-on collision if everything is just going to come right to the front of the van. So I am glad to keep this thing for another safety precaution. Just one more thing to not have to worry about, I guess. And yeah, it's not bad. Little doorway to get in the back. Works out for us. All right, well, there you have it. That is a tour of our van Hoagie. We've been on the road now for almost 2 months after our first trip, and it has been holding up super well. We really enjoyed it. We can work out of it all day. And this isn't the winter, this is January, so we really haven't spent too much time outside. So we're really pressure testing this van, and it's so far so good. So how long did it take to build this van? So I would say it's 3 to 4 hours a night for 5 months straight. So yeah, it was not easy by any means. And then for some of those who are asking, oh, do you have all this experience with this? No, I've never built a van before. Do a lot of work on our house. And so a lot of that translated over here, because at the end of the day, you're building a small house. The electrical work in the back, I had no business doing. Learned that all from some great resources online. Most of everything I learned here was honestly from the Far Out Ride website. They built a Transit and they documented it incredibly well, and I was able to follow along with the wiring diagrams, or the plumbing, or the gas lines, so that's been super helpful. But yeah, things with the van have been pretty good, and really, really love it, and I cannot recommend it enough.